Once upon a time, in a small village wrapped in silence by the surrounding mountains, there lived a young boy named Thomas. The village was peaceful, filled with golden meadows, narrow stone roads, and homes made of red brick and warm wood. When visitors walked through the village, the first thing they heard was the gentle river flowing through the center. But behind the beauty of this place, life wasn't always easy for the families who lived there. Thomas, only 12 years old, was known across the village for his bright eyes, his warm laughter, and a kindness that made even strangers feel at home. Whenever he ran down the road with his school bag bouncing against his back, the shopkeepers smiled and waved. The old women sitting outside their houses would say, "There goes the boy with the sunshine smile." But what nobody knew, what Thomas kept deep inside, was how heavy his heart really was. Thomas lived with his parents in a small, aging cottage. It had peeling paint, a leaking roof during the rainy season, and windows that sometimes rattled when the wind was strong. Still, it was home. Inside that cottage lived people Thomas loved more than anything in the world: his father, Mr. Thompson, and his mother, Mrs. Thompson. Thompson was a car painter. His hands were always coated with traces of paint, sometimes blue, sometimes silver, sometimes red. He worked long hours in a small workshop, breathing in the smell of paint and thinner every day. No matter how much he worked, his pay was small. Mrs. Thompson worked as a seamstress at home. Her sewing machine was old and slow, and she often worked late into the night, stitching dress after dress for the villagers. Despite their hard work, money slipped away faster than they could earn it. Unpaid bills stacked up on the kitchen counter. Some nights, dinner was little more than bread and soup. Yet Thomas' parents always tried to smile in front of him. They wanted him to feel safe. They wanted him to feel like everything would be fine. But Thomas heard things. He heard the whispered arguments. He heard his mother crying softly behind the closed door. He heard his father sigh heavily as he checked their bills again and again. Every morning, Thomas woke up earlier than he needed to. While his parents thought he was asleep, he listened to them talk in the kitchen. "What if we can't pay the rent this month?" His mother would whisper, "We'll figure something out." His father would reply, but his voice lacked confidence, "You've said that for months. We can't give up. Not now. Not when Thomas needs us." Hearing his parents' pain made a lump form in Thomas' throat. He was only a child, but he felt older. He understood more than his parents realized. And each morning, he promised himself he would smile in front of them so they wouldn't worry even more. He didn't want to add weight to their already heavy hearts. One chilly morning, as Thomas walked to school, he saw 3 older boys surrounding a younger boy named Peter. Peter was from Thomas' class. He had thick glasses that kept sliding down his nose and a small limp from a childhood injury. Today, the bullies were laughing at him, grabbing his backpack, and mocking the way he walked. Peter looked terrified. His shoulders were slumped, and his lip trembled as he tried not to cry. Something inside Thomas tightened. He knew what it felt like to be helpless. He couldn't sit back and watch someone else suffer. So he stepped forward. "Leave him alone," Thomas said firmly. The bullies laughed at him. One said, "Or what? You'll fight us?" Thomas shook his head. "No, but it doesn't make you strong to pick on someone who can't fight back." Maybe it was the calmness in his voice. Maybe it was the sincerity in his eyes. But the bullies eventually backed away, rolling their eyes and muttering under their breath. Peter lowered his head and whispered, "Thank you. I don't know why they hate me. I'll walk with you to school from now on," Thomas said. "You won't be alone." Peter's tears dried a little, and a small smile appeared. Together, they walked to school, and for the first time in a long while, Peter felt safe. Although Thomas was admired for his kindness, school wasn't easy for him. He loved learning, but concentration was hard when his mind kept drifting back to his parents, to the bills, to the fear of losing their home. His biggest struggle was math. Numbers danced around in his head like strangers refusing to introduce themselves. No matter how much he tried, he couldn't understand the concepts, especially fractions and long division. One afternoon, he stayed behind after school. His math teacher, Miss Adams, noticed him lingering. "Everything okay, Thomas?" He swallowed his pride. "Miss Adams, I don't understand today's lesson. And the homework. And maybe yesterday's lesson too. Miss Adams smiled gently. Thank you for telling me. Sit down. Let's go through it together, she explained slowly, step by step. Thomas tried again and again, sometimes failing, sometimes getting close. But Miss Adams didn't lose patience. She told him he was capable, that sometimes people just needed more time. That day, something changed in Thomas. He realized that asking for help didn't mean he was weak. It meant he still believed in himself. From then on, he stayed after school every few days, working with Miss Adams until the numbers finally made sense. Very gradually, math stopped being a mountain and became a hill he could climb. One evening, Thomas walked past his parents' bedroom door and heard something he never expected. We're 3 months behind on rent, his father said quietly. If we don't pay soon, the landlord will evict us. Double quotes. Mrs. Thompson's voice broke. Where will we go? We have nowhere else. We'll find a way, his father tried to assure her. But Thomas could hear the shaking in his voice. Silence followed. Then his mother whispered, I'm scared. Thomas pressed his back against the wall and slid down to the floor. His chest hurt. His eyes burned. He wrapped his arms around his knees, feeling helpless and small. He wanted to burst into the room and tell his parents that they weren't alone. He wanted to say he would help, that he would find a way. But he didn't want to add to their burden. So he wiped his tears quietly and made a decision. He would do whatever it took to save his family. After that night, Thomas started looking for small jobs around the village. He mowed grass for Mr. Benson, the elderly man who lived on the hill. He washed dishes at the local cafe after school. He helped Mrs. Harris carry groceries. He delivered letters and messages for the postman. He earned very little, but every coin went into a small wooden box he kept under his bed. He didn't spend a single cent on himself, not on candy, not on toys, not even on new shoes. Even though his old ones were worn thin, every night before sleeping, he opened the box and counted the coins. Sometimes his heart lifted, sometimes it sank. It was never enough still. He didn't give up. One afternoon while walking home, he noticed a bright, colorful flyer pinned to a tree. Village talent show, grand prize, $1. 500. Thomas froze. $1,500 was more money than he had ever seen at one time. It was enough to pay off a big part of his family's debt, enough to stop the eviction, enough to give his parents hope again. His heart raced. He tore the flyer off the tree and ran home. Mom, Dad, look, he said breathlessly, placing the flyer on the table. His parents looked uncertain. His mother touched his cheek gently. Thomas, you're brave. But what if you don't win? His father added, we don't want you to get hurt. Thomas shook his head. It doesn't matter. I have to try. I can't just sit and watch us lose everything. His parents exchanged a long look. Finally, his father sighed softly. If this is what you want, then we believe in you. Thomas hugged them tightly. For the first time in months, he felt a spark of hope warming his heart. Thomas chose to perform a song with his guitar. His grandfather had taught him to play when he was very young. Music was the one place where Thomas felt free from fear, free from pressure, free from the weight of the world. Every day after finishing his jobs, he practiced until his fingers hurt. He refined his chords, polished his lyrics, and poured every emotion into the melody. His song wasn't just music. It was his life, his struggle, his hope, his family. The night before the show, he barely slept. He kept imagining the stage, the audience, the moment his fingers touched the strings. The village hall buzzed with excitement. Families filled every seat. Children ran around laughing. The stage lights shone brightly, making everything look magical. Backstage, Thomas' hands shook. His stomach twisted. He felt like he might forget everything the moment he stepped onto the stage. His parents stood behind him, their eyes filled with love and pride. You've already made us proud, his mother whispered. You're stronger than you know, his father added. When Thomas' name was called, he felt the world slow down. He walked onto the stage, guitar in hand, legs trembling. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first chord echoed through the hall. Then he sang. His voice was soft at first, then stronger, filled with raw emotion. He wasn't just performing. He was telling his story. The fear of losing his home, the sight of his parents struggling, the nights he cried quietly, the hope he refused to let go of, everything was in that song. The hall fell silent. Even the children stopped moving. All eyes were on Thomas. When the final note faded, the room remained still for a moment. Then applause erupted, loud, thunderous, overwhelming. Thomas blinked, stunned. He felt tears slip down his cheeks. Never in his life had he felt so seen. The applause continued long after Thomas stepped away from the microphone. He stood frozen on stage, staring out at the audience. People were wiping their eyes. Some were smiling proudly. Others nodded at him with admiration. In that moment, Thomas felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, hope blooming inside his chest like a small, steady flame. Miss Adams clapped the loudest, tears shining in her gentle eyes. Peter waved excitedly from the crowd, grinning as wide as his little face allowed. Even the judges looked moved, whispering to each other as they scribbled their comments. Thomas walked backstage, heart pounding, hands trembling. His father hugged him tight while his mother placed her palm over his heart. "You did it, sweetheart," she whispered. "You made the whole village stop and listen." But inside, Thomas was still scared. What if he didn't win? What if everything he'd done still wasn't enough? After the final performance, all participants were called back onto the stage. Thomas stood among them, clutching his guitar to keep his hands from shaking. The lights were bright, the hall was packed, and the air felt heavy with anticipation. The host stepped forward with a gold envelope. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "thank you for an incredible night of talent. Tonight, the judges had a very difficult decision." Thomas' heartbeat quickened. He closed his eyes and prayed silently. The host continued, "And now, the winner of this year's talent show is..." The hall held its breath. Emily Carter. A burst of applause followed. Emily, a girl known for her incredible dancing, gasped in shock and covered her mouth with trembling hands. Her family jumped out of their seats in joy. Thomas felt a hollow ache in his chest. For a moment, he wondered if he'd failed his family. He wondered if all his effort had been for nothing. But before he could sink into disappointment, the audience erupted again. But this time, something felt different. People weren't just clapping for Emily. They were turning toward Thomas. They were cheering his name, Thomas. "Thomas, you were amazing. That boy has a heart of gold." The cheers rolled over him like a warm wave. Though he didn't win the prize, he won something that felt deeper, a connection with every person in that room. Emily noticed the crowd's reaction and walked straight to him. "Your song touched everyone," she said softly. "You deserved this as much as I did." Thomas smiled, though his eyes were heavy with mixed emotions. "Thank you," he whispered. As the event ended, villagers surrounded Thomas and his parents. "Your boy is special," said Mr. Miller, the grocer. "That song broke my heart and healed it at the same time," said Mrs. Harris. People who barely noticed Thomas before suddenly wanted to help. "How much do they owe in rent?" someone asked. "Let's collect something," another person suggested. But before his parents could say anything, Thomas shook his head. "I didn't sing to ask for charity." Mrs. Thompson pulled her son close, touched by his pride, but overwhelmed by the emotions around them. Then Miss Adams stepped forward. "This isn't charity, Thomas," she said softly. "This is gratitude. This village has needed hope for a long time, and you reminded us that kindness still matters. Let your community stand with you." The villagers agreed. One neighbor brought out an envelope. Another opened their wallet. Someone else offered groceries. One elderly woman placed a warm hand on Mrs. Thompson's arm and said, "You raised a beautiful boy." By the end of the night, the villagers had collected enough money to pay all the overdue rent, the electricity bill, and even leave something extra for food and necessities. Thomas stared at the pile of envelopes in disbelief. "I didn't expect this," he whispered. "You didn't have to expect it," his father said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You earned it with your heart." The walk home that night felt different. The moonlight was brighter. The air felt easier to breathe. Thomas walked between his parents, holding both their hands tightly. His mother squeezed his fingers. "You saved us." Thomas looked up, tears forming again. "I just wanted to help." "You did more than that," his father said. "You reminded us to believe again." They opened the door to their cottage. It was still old, still small, still worn, but for the first time in months, it didn't feel heavy. It felt warm again, safe. In the weeks that followed, everything slowly began to change. Thomas' father found extra work painting cars in a nearby town. The new money helped them repair the roof and buy better groceries. His mother started receiving more sewing orders after villagers recommended her. Her little sewing business slowly grew. For Thomas, life also shifted. He became more confident in school. Math no longer scared him. He volunteered in class more often. Miss Adams praised his work, and for the first time, he felt like he belonged in the classroom, not as a kid drowning in worry, but as someone capable. Peter and Thomas became inseparable. They walked to school together, ate lunch side by side, and helped each other with homework. The bullies stopped bothering Peter when they realized Thomas was always watching, always ready to step in. But more importantly, Thomas started to smile differently, deeper, more genuine. The weight that once pressed on his heart was lighter now. One sunny afternoon, months after the talent show, Thomas decided to hike up the hill overlooking the village. It was a place his grandfather used to take him. Standing at the top, Thomas could see everything: the rooftops, the river, the meadows stretching into the horizon. He sat on a large rock, the sun warm on his face, and let the wind play with his hair. He thought about the past months, the fear, the pain, the hopelessness, but also the courage, the music, the love of his parents, the kindness of his village. As he sat there, he remembered something his grandfather once told him: in every problem, my boy, there's a hidden bridge leading you forward. Some people never find it because they stop walking too soon. Thomas smiled softly. Back then, he thought he was drowning, but now he realized he had kept walking when everything told him to stop. And because of that, he had found the bridge: the talent show, the community, the hope he thought he had lost. A year later, the village held its annual harvest festival. This time, something special happened. The organizers invited Thomas to perform on the main stage, this time not as a contestant, but as a guest performer. People gathered early just to hear him sing. As he walked up to the stage, he saw familiar faces: Miss Adams, Peter, the shopkeepers, the elderly woman who had cried during his talent show, and dozens of others who had once been strangers but were now part of his extended family. Thomas sat on a stool, gently strummed his guitar, and looked out at the crowd. Last year, he began, I stood on a different stage and sang because I didn't know what else to do. My family was struggling, and I felt lost. But you all stood with us. You didn't just help us survive, you helped us breathe again. People listened silently, some nodding, others smiling. So tonight, I want to sing for you, Thomas continued. Not because I need help, but because I'm grateful. He played a new song, one he had written after the talent show. It was soft, gentle, warm. A song about community, love, and the courage to keep going even when everything feels impossible. When he finished, the applause was even louder than the year before. As time passed, Thomas never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the nights he cried quietly, the afternoons he worked odd jobs, or the overwhelming fear of losing his home. Those memories shaped him. They reminded him of his strength. They grounded him. He continued helping others, especially kids like Peter who needed a friend. He tutored younger students in math, remembering how Miss Adams helped him. He volunteered at the village center to support families facing financial issues. Just as his family once did, Thomas became known as the boy who never let sadness harden his heart. His parents also changed. Thompson worked with more hope now. He no longer carried shame for struggling. Instead, he carried pride for the son who had lifted them out of darkness. Mrs. Thompson smiled more. She sewed with joy, humming the tune Thomas had sung at the festival. They spoke openly with Thomas now, not hiding their struggles, but facing them together as a family. Their home was still the same small cottage, but now it felt filled with light. One evening, nearly a year after their crisis, Thomas stood outside under the stars. The sky was clear, sprinkled with glittering dots. He felt peaceful in a way he hadn't felt before. He whispered to himself, no problem is too big, as long as we don't face it alone. A soft rustle came from behind him. It was his mother. "What are you thinking about?" She asked. "Everything," he replied with a quiet smile. She wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "You're stronger than you know, Thomas, because of you and Dad," he said, "because of your heart." She corrected gently. Life didn't magically become perfect. New challenges came. New worries appeared. But there was a difference now. Thomas believed in himself. His parents believed in him. And the village believed in all three of them through music, courage, and love. Thomas learned a truth that would guide him for the rest of his life. When life feels heavy, you don't have to carry it alone. Hope grows best when people stand together.